Hello and welcome to our webinar, HarperCollins Children's Books Fall 2022 Librarian Preview. I'm Maggie Reagan, Senior Editor, Books for Youth at Booklist and Booklinks. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we will pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Links to today's slides and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. You can also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. If you have any trouble accessing these materials, please contact us at webinars@booklistonline.com. Last but not least, Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. From there, you can select Show or Hide Subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting Subtitle Settings. We have a wonderful presentation today, so without further ado, I'll pass things off to Patty Rosati, Director of School and Library Marketing at HarperCollins Children's Books. Take it away, Patty.
Thank you, Maggie. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to our Fall 22 preview. It's great to see you all. We have a great lineup for you today. I do hope that things are going well with you and that your lives are settling down and that you're able to get out and see loved ones and go to restaurants and bookstores and all of the places where good things happen. Speaking of where good things happen, just to note that we're planning on being at ALA in DC in June. So if you're going to be there, please do come by and say hello to us in person. It's been great to meet you all virtually, and we do hope in the days, weeks, and years to come that we'll be able to meet you in person. We do have 3 terrific speakers today, plus a special video message, and then members of the school and library marketing team will also present some of the key titles coming to you this fall, Fall 22. We aren't able to present all of our books, of course, in this 1 hour. So we put an Edelweiss collection together that features other really good choices for your patrons and your students. So please do check that out. And then note that we have e-galleys on both Edelweiss and NetGalley. One important thing to note is that our picture books and our graphic novels are only on Edelweiss. Full interior PDFs of our picture books are there, and you can download them right away. Once you find the title that you want to check out, you look under content and then links, and then you should see everything there. For middle grade and teen, you just need to request access if you don't have it already. And as long as in your profile you note that you are a teacher or a librarian, educator, you should be approved within a day or 2. We've asked our creators to stick around in case we have some time for questions at the end. So don't be shy about sending questions in the chat. Mimi Rankin will be monitoring those questions throughout. So we're packing a lot into this hour, so let's get right to it. We're going to start with picture books, and we're going to bring up our first award-winning creator of the day. Next slide, please. There we go. Eric Velasquez is a multi-award-winning illustrator of some of today's best nonfiction picture books. For his illustrated works, he's received all kinds of awards, including the Pura Belpré Award, the Coretta Scott King John Steptoe New Talent Award, the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Children's Literature. In Going Places, Victor Hugo Green and his glorious book, award-winning author Tanya Bolden's text is paired with Eric's dynamic artwork, while also incorporating historical documents for a rich, immersive, nonfiction picture book reading experience. We're really happy to have Eric with us today to hear more about his process and how he brought this important and not very well known part of our country's history to life. Please help me welcome Eric Velasquez.
Hi, thank you, Patty, for that introduction. And I want to share my screen so I can show you my process in terms of creating the images for Going Places. Okay, so this is Going Places. Victor Hugo Green and his glorious book. Okay, here we go. Written by the great Tanya Bolton. It's a nonfiction picture book about the Green Book, which was a travel guide written by Victor Hugo Green, an African-American postal worker from Harlem who wanted African Americans to stay safe and free of terror while traveling around the United States during segregation. This is my second illustrated picture book by Tanya Bolton for HarperCollins. And these are my initial sketches right on the manuscript while traveling to Philadelphia on Amtrak to attend the African-American Children's Book Project in Philadelphia, which is an annual event, and I get to see all my friends. And back in February 2020, I was able to sit side by side by Tanya. And Tanya and I talked while about the book while we began, and soon we began sharing personal travel stories while signing books. And this was our first HarperCollins book, which was Strong Voices. On the way back home, I began thinking about the purpose of the Green Book and the many reasons why people travel. Once I returned home to my studio, I ordered a copy of the Green Book and began working on my storyboard sketches. I usually do my storyboard sketches on 8.5 by 11 paper. Then I began studying the graphics in the Green Book. I looked at the artwork and the layouts, and I began looking at the artwork of Austin Briggs, especially for his use of white spaces in his art. I began collecting reference photos, including a book on Hackensack, New Jersey for its 1920s images, which is where Victor Hugo Green had his postal route. The storyboard sketches began to take shape, but I felt that they should look more like the images in the Green Book. Inspired by a line in the text, I thought of incorporating old postcards from the 1920s and 30s into the art as collage, but I was not sure where to begin since I had never done this kind of thing before. So there is a line in the text that references the postcards that Victor Hugo Green was delivering to the people on his postal route. My art director, Rachel, suggested this layout as a starting point, and I sent her back this. Then I contacted my former student, Andres, who became my first remote model. I sent him the sketches, and he posed himself along with his sister, and basically took the shots based on the sketches I sent him. The spread then looked like this. Then the art director requested I paint the postcards and the letters instead, which was quite a challenge. So then this is the finished drawing, and this is the printed spread. The initial storyboard sketch for this image, this is spread 1415. But once I knew that I had to paint the postcards, a lot of possibilities opened up. And then the images began to look like this. Some of the images are a combination of painted postcards and collage images of the Green Book and its ads. This is the storyboard sketch for this spread. The art director suggested where the collage images were going to be inserted. Fortunately, my wife, Elizabeth, is always willing to pose. This is the Photoshop composite that I do prior to starting to paint. And this is the work in progress. This is a photograph of the image up on my easel. As you can see, the composite image here on the left, the work in progress. This is the acrylic underpainting that I do on the painting prior to starting, and then the color sketch right next to it. And this is the printed spread when it's finished and printed in the book. Okay, this is the finished drawing for this spread. And before painting the finished spread, I usually paint a small color sketch, and that's so that I can understand what all the color mix is and that while I'm painting the finish, I'm not scrubbing out and starting all over again. And this is the final image there. The finished drawing is usually on 300-pound Fabriano watercolor paper, and the images for the book were all 15 inches by 22 inches. This is the color sketch, oil on copy paper. The paintings are finished all with oil on paper. Right. This is a sketch for the end papers that were not used. I was a little disappointed, but because of the format of the book, it didn't allow for end papers, but so I'm giving you guys a sneak peek of what the end papers were going to look like. And here are the cover sketches, variations on a theme. So I presented 6 cover sketches, which were all rejected. HarperCollins wanted to use this interior for the cover instead. Okay, and this is the printed spread, and this is the cover comp for it. I offered to paint a new image with more details, and so this is the underdrawing, and then the acrylic underpainting for the cover. The color sketch, and then the finished painting, which is 22 by 30. Which is a large one, a very large painting actually for me. All right, I want to give special shout outs to the wonderful Tanya Bolden for writing this wonderful manuscript on Victor Hugo Green and his glorious book, editor Karen Chapin, and my art director, Rachel Ziegler, remote model Andres Baumir, and supermodel Elizabeth Rosario. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Patty.
All right, am I on? Thank you, Eric. That was fantastic. I can't wait for everybody to see the finished product in person. It is truly stunning. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Dutton. My pronouns are she, her, and it is my absolute pleasure to be presenting the picture book section of this preview. As Patty mentioned earlier, full interior PDFs of all the picture books are posted on Edelweiss for immediate download. Once you find the title you're interested in, just look under content and then links, and you should see it there. So now right on to the good stuff. First up, we have a selection of some other really fantastic nonfiction about a variety of subjects. You are likely familiar with Susan Hood, the award-winning author of Lifeboat 12, Alias Anna, The Last Straw, Kids vs. Plastic, and many, many more fantastic titles. She is back with Brothers in Arms, a remarkable true story of an orphaned bear cub adopted by a group of teenage Polish soldiers who grew into a World War II hero. On the Corner of Chocolate Avenue, written by Zipporah Cohen, with art by the illustrator of The Crayon Man, Stephen Salerno. The book, or the story behind The Hershey's Kiss, this steam biography of Milton Hershey, is filled with perseverance and persistence, and it's perfect for the chocolate lover, the inventor, and the science experiment obsessed. Mama in Congress is the inspiring story of Rashida Tlaib, one of the first Muslim women elected to Congress, and her family, by award-winning author Miranda Paul, and co-written by Congresswoman Tlaib and her son, Adam. Another biography centered around a trailblazing female politician, Phenomenal AOC, focuses on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, America's youngest congresswoman. This one is written by Poor Bell Prey-winning author Anika Aldemoy-Denise and illustrated by Loris Laura. And last but not least on this slide, from the creator of the Oscar-winning documentary My Octopus Teacher and his diving partner, comes a best-in-class photographic picture book about the wonders of the sea. Next slide. Another nonfiction picture book by a powerhouse team, Maya's Song chronicles the life of poet and activist Maya Angelou. Newbery Honor and Coretta Scott King author award winner Renee Watson uses poetry to lyrically chronicle Angelou's rich life in a deeply moving narrative. Vivid and striking collage art by Caldecott Honor recipient and Coretta Scott King Illustrator Award winner Brian Collier completes this unforgettable portrait of one of the most important American artists in history. Next slide. Maya Angelou led a remarkable, devastating, powerful life. And this text beautifully describes the love of her family, her childhood in Arkansas, her deep friendship with luminaries like James Baldwin and Martin Luther King Jr., and the way her work was celebrated, including the invitation she received to write and recite a poem for Bill Clinton's inauguration. It also covers the complex and dark times in her life, like the abuse she endured and her 5 years of silence in its aftermath. And it does it in a really sensitive and appropriate way for young readers. Next slide. This next slide spotlights 3 of the most stunning jackets I've ever seen, all celebrating Black joy. And trust me, the interiors are just as beautiful. Next slide. First, we have a library by the Nikki Giovanni, illustrated by Aaron K. Robinson. This is a lyrical ode to the magic of a library as a place not only for knowledge, but also imagination, exploration, and escape. As all of you know, libraries are sanctuaries for any reader, young or old, and Nikki Giovanni's accessible poetry reaffirms the importance of libraries in the lives of all people, especially Black and brown children, and the important work these institutions do in order to help create lifelong readers. Next slide. These interior spreads are from Black Gold, a joyous, empowering, poetic celebration of Black children, and a reminder of the universe's boundless love in stunning verse and captivating collage. Next slide. In Hold Them Close, Jamila Tompkins Bigelow pens a lyrical and poignant love letter to Black children, celebrating the glory, triumph, and pride of the African-American history and future. Her text is brought to full life by collage artist Patrick Dower and renowned Brooklyn photographer Jamel Shabazz. Next slide. This selection here spotlights some books from a diverse group of creators with a range of different styles and subjects. Next slide. What's Sweeter is exactly as charming as its title implies. It's an extraordinary picture book debut that focuses on the everyday moments that slow the world down for all of us. A hug from someone we haven't seen in a long time, a soft spot behind a cat's ear, a ladybug landing on your arm. Next slide. A little fish lost in the deep, dark ocean must find a spark of light to find its way home. From author illustrator Pam Fong, A Spark in the Dark is a powerful picture book about the ocean of feelings inside all of us. Next slide. Year of the Cat, a legendary race determined the order of the animals in the Chinese zodiac calendar. But what happened to Cat, the one animal who never received a year? Rat, Cat, and their 11 friends star in this funny animal adventure that introduces young readers to both the Chinese zodiac and the importance of apologizing. Next slide. Mark Majewski's Butterfly Child is a gorgeously painted, tender story about a young child who loves dressing up like a butterfly. But when other kids shun the child for the clothes they don't understand, it takes a father's encouragement for the kid to find joy in the butterfly wings once more. This is a deeply personal story for Mark, who pulled this from a memory he had of wearing dresses, being scolded by his dad, and then his grandpa came downstairs in a dress to support him. These little moments of nonverbal support are so impactful, and we see that mirrored in this story so beautifully. Next slide. And we have 3 more I want to touch on. Big Truck Day is an irresistible Things That Go story about trucks, reading, sharing, community, and helping others, from the award-winning author Roseanne Perry and debut illustrator Nikki Stage. Izzy Paints is an adorable and accessible celebration of art and the joys of creating, from fan favorite Tim Miller. And finally, Reina Ramos Works It Out is the first in a brand new I Can Read series that follows a 6-year-old Latina girl named Reina and her friendships. It's really great for social, emotional learning. And next slide. Rounding out the picture book section, I am so excited to introduce Magnolia Flower, the first in a series of 6 planned adaptations of Zora Neale Hurston's work, adapted by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi and illustrated by Levis Wise. And we have a video from Dr. Kendi, I believe. And without further ado, I will let him speak for himself.
Hey everyone, I'm Ibram X. Kendi, and I just want to share with you a few moments on really the story, the book story, how this book, Magnolia Flower, came to be. You know, one day I was thinking about how my daughter is potentially going to have to wait, you know, until she's in middle school or potentially high school in order to read, you know, Zora's words. And of course that saddened me, but it also intrigued me. It also sort of challenged me. It also caused me to think, well, well, could I sort of help to be involved in bringing the words of Zora Neale Hurston to my daughter and to children, all over this country and world, and specifically Magnolia Flower is a short story that Zora wrote, and it was one of these stories that I read that I always thought could be adapted for children. And so, to not to give it away, but it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story about an Afro native girl named Magnolia Flower, and it's really about a love story. And I just thought the story was not only beautiful, but even the imagery was beautiful. And I always thought that this was the type of story that I wanted my daughter to read, and so I'm so excited that Magnolia Flower is about to be born for children everywhere. Hey everyone.
Thank you. All right, we're going to talk about middle grade, but first, I'm going to introduce you to a busy and multi-talented man, COLIN MELOY. Besides being the frontman of the Decemberists, COLIN is the author of 6 outstanding books for kids, including The Whiz Mob and the Grenadine Kid and the New York Times bestselling Wildwood Chronicles, which is currently in development for an animated feature film from Leica Studios. His latest book, The Stars Did Wander Darkling, is a suspenseful middle grade horror story set in 1980s Oregon. We're really thrilled to have COLIN join us bright and early from his West Coast studio to speak to us some more about his writing process and his incredible new book. Ladies and gentlemen, COLIN MELOY.
Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. Yeah, hello, welcome. Glad you could make it. It is morning here in Oregon. So I want to talk a little bit about this book that I wrote, The Stars Did Wander Darkling, and give you an idea what kind of book it is and where it came from. I feel like the origin really goes back to, I think it was like 2018, doing a Halloween street somewhere, taking my kids trick-or-treating, and noticing that there was, there's families, all kids of all ages, and lots of teenagers too, and wearing a bunch. I think the costume of the time was Pennywise the clown from It, and like people like really doing it up. It was kind of horrific. Remembering reading the book as a kid myself and being like, oh my God, this clown is terrifying. But noticing there was all these 9-year-old and 10-year-old kids running up to him, and these costumes being so exciting, and actually saying his name, they recognized the costume, which struck me as so fascinating. Is like, how are these kids interacting and knowing about this? And I feel like it's just all kind of part of the zeitgeist, knowing, not what a scary clown is, but specifically like Pennywise the clown from It. And it just got me thinking about like, where are they getting that? They're not old enough to be reading It or any Stephen King. So, but there's clearly this desire, this love of horror. And it got me thinking about me as a kid, and I was the same kind of kid. Like, I loved horror novels as soon as I kind of, figured it out and found my way to those particular library stacks. I think I came into reading a lot of fantasy and sci-fi, and then came into like middle grade or like horror books for younger kids. I'm thinking like John Belair's House with a Clock in Its Walls, or maybe like Banicula or something like that. But quickly I think I discovered that what was available to me as a 4th or 5th grader, there wasn't that much of a wealth of horror to read, and I really was fascinated by it. And yeah, no, no shade thrown on Bunnicula or anything like that, but I wanted more. And so as soon as I got like old enough where I was kind of probably in middle grade YA territory, like I found Stephen King and started just devouring Stephen King. And I'm, as librarians out there, you probably know those readers as well, who just kind of skip that entire step and go straight to Stephen King. Even though like there's a lot of like really rough stuff in Stephen King. And thankfully, I think I had supportive and permissive parents and permissive librarians who felt maybe that I was ready, and maybe it was the 80s, so everything was a little bit more permissive. But I devoured the entire Stephen King section at the Lewis and Clark Library in Helena, Montana. I don't know if anybody's here from Lewis and Clark Library, but shout out to you guys. And I thankfully, yeah, so I read these and loved them, but always kind of knew that it was a little bit above my sort of reading pay grade. So it occurred to me as I was seeing these kids seeing Pennywise the Clown on the street and getting really excited and recognizing that there seemed to be a gap, that like there need to be more horror written for that age group, from like the 10 to 12 kids that was like genuinely scary and not trying to be humorous, but like really poking at that kind of scary place in your heart, in your brain, that you desperately want to be touched, but just not like have it pounded, like, you know, to be totally terrified where you know, are traumatized, but just at like a shade of it. And I have a 9-year-old now who is very horror curious. And so I wanted to write a book that would kind of fit that age group, that, you know, that particular kid, and for the kid that I was, who was looking for those kinds of books. So I have never written a horror novel before. My other books have been, you know, the Wildwood Chronicles are kind of like a sort of epic fantasy series, and the Whiz Mob and the Grenadine Kid is kind of like a heist, you know, historical period novel. And so but then I was like, but I know this stuff in my bones. This is the stuff I grew up on. So I reread a bunch of Stephen King. I reread It, even though I did read that in 7th grade, like right when I was the age of the kids in that book, and it really hit me. I really love that book. I reread Carrie, Danse Macabre, like his book about writing horror. I like queried friends, what were the scariest books that they had ever read. My sister Miley came back with Daphne du Maurier. So I read some Daphne du Maurier, Rebecca, which was great. At my elder son's behest, read a bunch of Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, which is really wild. And I'd read a little as a kid, but really kind of dove into it. And then other things like William Sloane's Rim of Morning, cosmic horror stuff, just to kind of get myself in a mindset, try to figure out how are these books constructed. And it's complicated. I mean, it is sort of like writing a mystery novel in that sense. But I really wanted to set out to write, and I feel like I've done this with all my books, is write the book that I would want to read as a kid. What was the book that, you know, the kid lost in the Stephen King stacks? What would he want to read? And so it's drawing from my own experience, you know, trying to cobble this world together, reflecting on my childhood as a kid in Helena, Montana, growing up in a small town, and how, you know, in the 80s we were kind of given there, it was maybe less, I don't know, protective. We were allowed to ride bikes all over town. We were kind of given almost complete freedom. And I remember our weekends, we would just have this autonomy to fill up our days and do whatever and get into what kind of scrapes and adventures we wanted to do. I'm probably idealizing that a little bit, but it was like that, I think. And so it occurred to me that setting in the 80s, you know, drawing from my own experience, my own group of friends, the things that we did as kids seemed appropriate. And then I think also setting it on the Oregon coast felt right. For one reason, I have this really distinct memory of a trip down the Oregon coast when I was in 5th grade. My first time going to Oregon. My grandparents had just moved to Ashland, Oregon. My mom took us on this road trip down the coast. And I was in 5th grade. I was right in that space where just everything was sort of imaginative and exciting to me. The Oregon coast, and many of you maybe have been there, but it's not a typical, beachy coast. Like, it is dramatic. It is windswept. These kind of rocky cliffs and crags and things. It really kind of gets the imagination going. And I was so taken by it. I remember visiting the dunes on the southern Oregon coast, and like standing on a dune and making my mom take a picture of me, saying that that's going to be my author photo someday for this novel, I don't know, that I was making up in my head. I've asked my mom to try to find that picture, but it may be lost to time. So the Oregon coast was going to be a big part of it. Drawing from my own childhood, creating this sort of free-flowing world for these kids to explore. I drew a lot from Manzanita and Astoria. Of course, Astoria, I'm wearing my Astoria hat, a big shout out, but is where the Goonies were set. The Goonies actually that film was out that summer that I went down the coast. So that was all part of it. Trying to pull from this idea of cosmic horror. I felt like that battle between good and evil was really important. I was also kind of thinking of that kind of polarized conflict from like Time Bandits, which is another great movie that I loved as a kid, and I think it serves as an inspiration for a lot of the stuff that I did. And also got a lot of input from my older son Hank, who's the Lovecraft fan, and he read early drafts and gave me a lot of tips, some of which I didn't put in there because it would have involved several volumes of a book. And just piecing together these elements. There's the Flavel house, which is this crazy mansion in Astoria that served as the inspiration for the Langdon house in the book. And then, like all good horror, and I think it's interesting that there's so much horror, particularly that Stephen King wrote about kids, when you think of It, when you think of Carrie, because, like Pet Sematary, there's this liminal space between childhood and adulthood where we exist in this kind of imbalance between, which I recall as being a really fertile time for my imagination, and for my development as a creative person, but also it's kind of a little scary. You're just right on the precipice between childhood and adulthood, and you're so excited to become an adult, but you're so afraid to leave childhood behind. So it seemed like an appropriate place. So these kids are 12 and 13 in the book, these 4 kids that are the kind of core of the story, and there's this changing world inside. Their town is changing. There's these 3 entities that have sort of shown up, and nobody seems, all the adults seem kind of oblivious, and meanwhile the adults start exhibiting strange behaviors. And I think it touched on probably what's like a pretty acute fear for most kids, is that somehow the adult world is abandoning them, and it also, I think, not only is scary, but I think, kind of some of the presumptions that kids have about adults maybe, are proved true there, that adults can't be relied on, that it's really the kids who have the agency to sort of solve things. So I don't want to give away too much about the book. I hope you read it. I hope you love it. I hope it scares you. I hope that you can recommend, I hope you can find the kids that are looking at Stephen King, but maybe aren't quite ready for it. And that you can hand this book to them. I'm sure I would have appreciated that as a kid. And I hope that those kids find it. I hope they read it. I hope it scares them. And my dream is that they would then hand it to another kid and say, hey, sort of like a secret being passed on, like, this really freaked me out. I hope it freaks you out too. So there you go. And I'll be out in the fall visiting schools and bookstores. So I hope to see you guys out there in the fall, September.
Colin, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for being here. And I know I remember having an 8-year-old patron come up to me asking for it. So they definitely want to be scared. My name is Christina Carpino and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to take you through some of our fantastic middle grade titles. Up first, we've got Violet and Joby. Mouse siblings Violet and Joby have enjoyed a comfortable life inside a family's home, but suddenly they find themselves trapped in a box and transported far away into the woods. Readers will laugh along as the mice try to figure out what to eat, where to sleep, how to survive, and this strange new world known as the wild. Complete with lovely black and white illustrations throughout, this title is great for all your animal fans, from reluctant to avid readers. We also have the Vanderbeekers on the road. Our favorite Harlem family heads on a cross-country road trip in this adventurous and entertaining next chapter in the beloved Vanderbeeker series. Next. And we have a new companion book to the Newbery Honor winning The Year of Billy Miller by Kevin Henkes. And in case you missed it, another title in this series, Billy Miller Makes a Wish, is out now in paperback. Next. Mapmaker by Lisa Moore Ramey. Walt loves nothing more than passing the time in his new boring town of Blackbird Bay, working on the map of the fantasy world he's creating, Jaruba. When Walt discovers that he can make his map come to life, his new home is suddenly much less boring. Soon, Walt is pulled into a mystery much larger than he could have imagined, and the fate of the Earth is left in his hands. Full of epic world building, adventure, mystery, and lots of action, this contemporary fantasy will appeal to fans of Amari and Rick Riordan Presents titles. Playing through the turnaround, for the band kids at Connor Eubanks Middle School, Mr. Lewis's jazz lab class is the best part of 5th grade. That is, until budget cuts mean Mr. Lewis is out of a job and the students are out of a teacher. The students decide they need to take matters into their own hands and begin an activism movement that pulls in the entire middle school. Told from multiple perspectives, this fast-paced story will have wide appeal to your middle grade readers. Newbery Honor-winning author of Other Words from Home, Jasmine Warga brings us a new robot to fall in love with a rover story. Rez is on a mission from NASA to explore the planet Mars and report back on everything he finds. And he finds a lot, from dust storms to dangerous cliffs. Mars challenges all of Rez's programming and circuits. Told from the rover's perspective in short chapters, this is the perfect next book for fans of the wild robot and the one and only Ivan. Margaret Peterson Haddix brings us a new series with The Secret Letters. Colin and Nevaeh's families own rival junk removal companies, but when both discover mysterious letters in attics they're cleaning out, they come together to uncover the truth of what happened. This is the first book in a series, and each title will explore a different era of history and how the echoes of that time period are felt today. Next slide. Shot Clock. NBA star Karan Butler has teamed up with Justin A. Reynolds to bring us a book about much more than sports. Basketball means almost everything to Tony, but the game has become much harder to play since his best friend and fellow player Dante was killed by the police. Tony decides to carry on Dante's legacy by trying out for a local elite team and is heartbroken when he doesn't make the cut. Coach James has a different path in mind for Tony, offering him a position as the team's statistician. This book is full of hope, healing, and plenty of basketball action to keep readers engaged. You Only Live Once, David Bravo. David is not ready to start middle school, especially since he doesn't have a single class with his best friend, Antoine. The year goes from bad to worse, and he enters Antoine at their cross-country meet. Enter Fee, a talking dog who tells David he has made a choice in the past that put him in the wrong timeline. Groundhog Day meets the multiverse in this comical and heartwarming middle grade novel. Rain Rising is a debut novel in verse, and it's truly breathtaking. Rain's brother is the typical all-American boy. With talent on the football field and an academic gift, he attends a local private high school and is on track to attend an elite college. When he and some classmates go on a school trip to visit one of these colleges, however, he's badly beaten by some of the frat boys. Rain is struggling to emotionally understand what has happened to her brother, while also coming to terms with her own identity and mental health struggles. This book is a powerful read that shows the importance of being open about one's emotions and accepting love and help in order to become the best version of oneself. Nikhil Out Loud. I'm reading this one right now. It's great. Nikhil Shah is famous as a voice actor for the popular cartoon show Raj Reddy in Outer Space. But when his mom moves the family to rural Ohio to take care of her sick father, Nikhil's insecurities are front and center. Things go from bad to worse when he's cast as the lead in the school play, and some members of the community protest having an openly gay actor in the role. This earnest, honest, and heartwarming story about finding one's own voice will inspire and affirm. And Where You've Got to Be, Noli is feeling left behind. At home, her 14-month older sister now cares less about Cousins Week and more about ballet. And at school, her best friend Jessa suddenly wants to be older and cooler. Noli's struggle to navigate the difficult transition between childhood and teenagerdom will resonate with many readers, especially fans of Rebecca Stead and the remarkable journey of Coyote Sunrise. Next slide. The Anti-Racist Kid comes from Tiffany Jewell, and this brings her message from her previous title, How to Be Anti-Racist, to a younger audience. Tiffany has experience working as an educator with elementary students, and this book is a wonderful way to start conversations at home and in the classroom with readers ages 8 to 12. Next slide. Complete with fun illustrations, this book is accessible and informative and will inspire children to not only be their own authentic selves, but to be an activist in order to create a more just and inclusive society. Next slide. And we've got even more great middle grade for you. Decomposition of Jack. What do roadkill and divorce have in common? Both are messy and ruining Jack's life. Jack's parents' research into the decomposition of animal carcasses they scrape off the side of the road pays the bills. But now that his dad has moved out, Jack is the one with his mom on the side of the road, earning him the nickname Jack Splat. When Jack discovers there may be a thought to be extinct cougar in town, he begins to think that if he can speak up for the cougar, maybe he'll learn to speak up for himself as well. In the year the maps changed, it's 1999 and 12-year-old Fred's town is welcoming Kosovar Albanian refugees, causing a rift in the town between those who want to help and those who feel to drain on the town's resources. As Fred gets to know her new neighbors, her life is forever changed. This fictional debut about recent history is especially timely with the conflicts going on in our world today. Sardines by Sashi Kaufman is breakfast club for middle schoolers. Lucas is part of a group of kids from different social groups that have largely ignored one another in their after-school program. When Finn moves to town, he brings the kids together to play a game of sardines. Soon they're exploring the woods together, becoming friends, and helping one another's secret wishes come true. Will Lucas find the strength to share his secret with these unexpected friends? And finally, Play Like a Girl is a debut graphic novel about Misty Wilson's experience as the only girl on her town's football team. Illustrated by her husband, Misty's story will resonate with anyone who struggled to fit in during their middle school years, whether they're sports fans or not. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm Dube on screen. Thanks, Christina. Lots of good middle grade and lots more good middle grade that we aren't able to present today. So again, do please check out our Edelweiss collection. I am very excited to introduce you to our next speaker, JODI LYNN ANDERSON. JODI is the best-selling author of Peaches, Midnight at the Electric, The Vanishing Season, Tiger Lily, and the popular 13 Witches books and the May Bird trilogy. Her new novel, Each Night Was Illuminated, tells a story of saints and floods, secrets and truths, rage and love, and the bravery it takes to bet your life on a new kind of hope. And a personal note, one of the side effects of the pandemic for me has been that I find myself in reading slumps, and that's really tough for a person who defines themselves as a reader, and it's tough for a person in my profession as well. JODI's book pulled me out of this most recent slump. I think about particular scenes often months and months after first reading it. If you're having a slump of your own, and I understand that I'm not the only one in this boat, this one, pick it up. It will, you'll fall under its spell. Please help me welcome JODI LYNN ANDERSON.
Y'all, thank you so much, Patty. I just feel so excited and grateful to be able to share with y'all about this book. which is so much a part of me and so daunting to put out in the world for that reason. So after turning in the first draft to my wonderful editor, Rosemary Brosnan, I spent probably a couple of hours staring at the wall in my kitchen with this awkward sensation that my guts were now on the outside of my body. But over the years of writing, I've come to think that if I'm gonna ask someone to spend their time reading something I've written, going inside out is kind of the least I can do. And what's more, I really believe vulnerability is urgently required in these times, as scary as it is to me to offer it. I think in a lot of ways, my stories are always about simple and small persuasions, trying to pick apart the tiny pieces of what adds up to what we believe. And in real life, I'm not a particularly persuasive person. I've been trying to talk my parents into buying cage-free eggs for about 15 years. And I finally gave up. And actually, I kind of practiced this talk for a friend of mine, and she said, "Oh, wait, I thought you told me not to buy cage-free eggs." So that's pretty indicative of my my ambitions as an influencer. I don't think it's gonna happen. But luckily, it's different with stories. Stories so generously let us writers tug people into a way of seeing and to experience the things we wish to share, and often what we wish to share most urgently. So when I begin a story, there are so many seemingly unrelated pieces that sort of drift down on me like feathers. But I know I'm onto something when I start to feel like all of the feathers belong to the same animal. This novel came from a lot of places in that way. It came from a 3-year stretch of intense insomnia. It came from the way I spent my sleepless nights, which was reading books about the Dark Ages and picturing those lost times from the sky. Rome at night crumbled and dark, and the orderlessness it left behind after it fell. Campfires scattered across the landscape. I was sleep deprived and always half dreaming, and the echoes of a fractured time and the shadowy visuals of saints and angels captured me. The story also came from my love of ghosts, because ghosts for me mean that there are things deeper than what we see. And finally, it came from rage. These days, it seems anger has become the water we swim in, and at times it eats me up. I'm pretty superstitious about this, how a story about so many different things is already before it even begins about one, that all the pieces are meant to fit, in this case, into a novel about a girl and a demagogue, floods and first love, and what one unstable age can say about another. When Cassie Blake is a kid, a bike riding, shy, wild beast of a girl from New Jersey, like I used to be, she meets Elias Kahn, not knowing that they're about to become entwined for life. Raised Catholic, she believes in all the holy stories she's heard and that angels watch over her when she's in danger. And so when Elias, who's visiting for the summer, promises to show her a spot on a hill from which she can see heaven, she agrees to go. Instead, what the new friends happen to witness that day is a terrible accident. Many years later, when they reunite as teenagers, they realize they experienced two different things the day of the crash. Cassie saw her faith disappear, and Elias saw ghosts rising from the wreckage. In the time since then, Cassie has given up her wildness for niceness. She holds her sardonic sense of humor close to her chest. She values safety, keeping her little brother away from every potential choking hazard in existence, and working at a quiet local convent, spending her weekends bantering with an irreverent nun who has a crush on Bruce Springsteen and happens to be her best friend. Cassie's convinced She's protected herself from the dangers of the world, except that she's forgotten how to sleep. She spends endless nights awake, reading a story from the convent library about a dark age saint whose faith made a leaf grow to fit her and carry her across the sea. When Elias, who has opinionated bedhead hair and seemingly no fear, asks her to sneak out with him on the regular to hunt for ghosts, it's her insomnia and loneliness that drive her to it, not any kind of hope they'll find what they're looking for. The two launch a restless summer night search to prove what Elias saw the day of the crash was real. But really, the nights become an escape from the pressures of Cassie's devout family, whose faith she doesn't share, and from the town itself, which, thanks to a local bitter leader and increasingly wild weather, seems to have gone combustible. And the more Cassie knows about Elias, who would show his belly to a bear, the more she comes to confront the costs of her own cautiousness. Cassie is falling in love with a boy who believes in the unseen and all sorts of other frivolous things, and she is angry. In Green Valley, it will rain for 70 days. Cassie and Elias will know each other for 78. And when it comes to a rapidly shifting planet, people in her town are pointing at anyone and anywhere but at the ground under their feet. Cassie's journey is a search for a bundle of answers that I, as her creator, don't have. She is hesitant about anger. She feels it ricochets, and she's not wrong. She silences complicity, and at the same time, rage gives birth to rage. And where does somebody in disordered times with a world to hope for and people to protect go from there? And this is where, for me, magic and faith become two feathers of the same animal. We can't know what we can't picture. We can only try to move in its direction. We have to push toward the world we want, which is uncertain, hazy, and certainly unpromised, as much as we have to push against the world we don't want, which is all around us and clear as day. This is the only way I know how to define faith. I fear, very personally, putting a book about rage into the world. I share Cassie's worries about anger. When I write, I want it to be a whisper, especially to those who are not in my choir. But I also know I'm inherently averse to ruffling feathers. I used to let boys run faster than me rather than let them lose a race. I used to distract my mom whenever we drove past a funeral home simply because I knew her father had died. It's my instinct to smooth things over always, but fury can't be swallowed without swallowing us. And that is what Cassie's story is about. In journeying through this book, my challenge as a writer has been accepting that I will never say things just right. The self-trust Cassie must cling to is that the wind at the back of her anger is empathy. Vulnerability is required, never more than when we are enraged. I say this with the ever-present knowledge that so many of the people gathering for this event are the very people who are protecting our ability to say anything at all. People who work to shelter and share everything that needs to be said, whether it's said perfectly or not. And I really hope you all care about this story like I do. And I'm really grateful for you and your courage. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jody. And we thank you for you and your courage and your words and being here with us today. I feel emotional. I'm gonna zip through some teen titles so that we can maybe get to a couple of author questions. So these are books by authors that you know. I don't think I need to say much about the first one, Adam Silvera. This is a prequel to They Both Die at the End, which of course has been a bestseller for more than a year, TikTok loved phenomenon. This is a prequel. The story begins on the first day of the Death Cast program, and it is, of course, heartbreakingly beautiful and captivating and really unforgettable. The next, Whiteout. set in Atlanta when over Christmas time, when Atlanta is blanketed in snow, but the warmth of young love just might melt the ice in this novel of interwoven narratives, Black joy, and cozy sparkling romance, written by, you know, a who's who of YA superstars: Donnell Clayton, Tiffany Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. This is another terrific book about Black teen love, and each relationship within is as unique and sparkling as a Southern snowflake. The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson, who I love to call the queen of YA suspense and the shocking plot twist. She's back here with the novel inspired by Stephen King's classic novel Carrie. There's Stephen King again, and true events of recent history. Tiffany injects America's unique brand of racism as the central horror of this novel, set against the background of a Georgia town hosting a segregated prom. And yes, they do still exist. And then last but not least, sweeping adventure, breathtaking twists of fate, an immersive world based on Norse mythology are woven together in this first volume of the Runestone saga from the New York Times bestselling author Cinda Williams Chima, which we're publishing in November. Next slide, please. Some other new and noteworthy YA books. Rust en Route is by Justina Ireland, who's the visionary author of Dread Nation and the winner of the Scott Odell Award this year for her debut middle grade novel, Ophi's Ghost. Here she returns to YA with a spellbinding new historical fantasy set at the crossroads of race and power in Depression era New York. Reader, I Murdered Him is, I think, gets my award for best title of the season. This is a daring tale of female agency and revenge about a queer teenage vigilante in Victorian England. It is set after Jane Eyre and imagines an alternate world in which the misogyny and abuse common in those Victorian era is challenged rather than romanticized. How to Excavate a Cart is Becky Albertalli meets Casey McQuiston in Stonewall honor author Jake Maya Arlo's YA debut. It's a sapphic Jewish twist on the classic Christmas enemies to lovers rom-com, where college freshman Shani's internship is interrupted by a whirlwind winter fling. And then we have Belittled Women, sharp and subversive. This is a delightfully messy YA rom-com that offers a sly wink to the classic Little Women as teenage Jo Porter rebels against living in the shadow of her literary namesake. I think that's it. Next slide, please. Make sure I'm right. Yes, great. Please do check out our Edelweiss collection for more teen, more middle grade, more picture books coming to you in fall 22. Once again, I want to thank all of our amazing creators for sharing their stories and their process with us today, and thank my colleagues for telling you, for giving you some great book talks. And I hope that you're going to add those to your TBR pile. We might have couple minutes to answer some questions. Mimi, who also, I believe her email is here. She volunteered herself as tribute. If you have any questions that you want to ask us directly about anything HarperCollins related, please email Mimi and she will get back to you. But Mimi or Grace, I'm not sure if we have any time for some questions.
I don't see any questions, just a lot of library love for Eric, Colin, and Jody. So thank you all so much for sharing that.
Okay. Well, very good. I think I'm going to kick it then back to our friends at Booklist to close us out and do some final housekeeping. Thanks again for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Patty. And thank you so much to Eric, Colin, Jody, and Dr. Kendi on the video. And another huge thank you to the HarperCollins Children's School Library Marketing Team. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, Edelweiss catalog, certificate of completion, and the video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit www.booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones, like those you see here. If you are not yet a subscriber, you can pair the page-by-page reading experience of print with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com and lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of this special webinar offer to get Booklist for $75. Patron-friendly, librarian-approved, and free with a Booklist subscription. Booklist Reader, Booklist new digital-only magazine highlighting diverse readers' advisory recommendations for all ages, has arrived. To see and share the latest issue, visit booklistonline.com/reader-issues. And we're very excited to share that Booklist, Booklinks, and Booklist Reader recently joined the Overdrive Magazines program in partnership with Zinio and are available for your patrons to read in Libby. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. And one more huge thank you to our panelists and to our sponsor, HarperCollins Children's Books. This concludes today's webinar.